Good evening, everyone. First off, I'd like to welcome you here this evening for tonight's panel discussion. It's truly my pleasure to welcome each and every one of you here this evening to our program titled Clearing the Air on Vaping. My name is Adam Bennett, and I'm a certified tobacco treatment specialist and tobacco educator for Hanover Hospital. It's truly my honor to be your opening speaker for tonight's panel discussion on the topic of vaping in our community. Before we begin this evening's program, I'd like to take a moment to thank the York City School District for their generosity in allowing us to use the facility here tonight. In addition, we would like to thank our sponsors for helping us to put this event together. That includes Pennsylvania State Representative, the Honorable Kevin Schreiber and his staff, the City of York, the American Lung Association in Pennsylvania, Memorial Hospital, WellSpan Health, and Eat, Play, Breathe York. All of today's panelists participate in some way, shape, or form with Eat, Play, Breathe York. For those of you that are not familiar with it, Eat, Play, Breathe York is a community-based movement seeking to ensure that healthy lifestyle choices are always available and convenient for those who live, work, and play within the city of York. By listening to and understanding the needs of the community members, forming local partnerships, and implementing policy, system, and environmental changes that promote healthy eating and physical activity, as well as decreasing tobacco use and exposure, the movement believes that a healthier York can be developed for current and future generations. Eat, Play, Breathe York is committed to creating a tobacco-free environment in York City and promotes tobacco-free playgrounds and parks, provides prevention, education, and activities to prevent youth from using tobacco products, and promotes tobacco-free policies in homes and the community to reduce exposure to tobacco smoke pollution. Tonight's program is aimed at educating the community about tobacco use, quitting tobacco, and as we will discuss, a relatively new alternative to tobacco that has taken the world by storm. As everyone here in attendance is aware, the use of electronic nicotine delivery devices, also known as e-cigarettes, vaporizers, and mods, just to name a few, or as it's called in practice, vaping, has become widespread across the country and the globe within the past 7 to 8 years. As a result, and as it becomes more widespread, a growing number of people from every corner of our global community have raised questions about the risks and the benefits that could emerge from the use of these products. Questions have also been raised regarding the potential for these products to reduce the well-known and long-established harms that may occur from the use of traditional tobacco products and smoking, as well as concerns about the growing use of vaping products by young people today. As is the case with most things in life, there are many opinions, facts, and myths about this topic, and that is why we're here tonight. To begin to demystify this new and largely misunderstood phenomenon we call vaping. Tonight's panelists have been tasked with discussing numerous issues surrounding vaping, coming from a variety of different perspectives, balancing both the pros and the cons, if you will. When preparing tonight's opening remarks, I asked myself, what is the best thing that could come out of tonight's program? Knowing that we'll have parents, educators, maybe even young people, healthcare professionals, regular Joes and Janes who just want to quit smoking, cloud chasers, vaping industry representatives, and maybe even the average confused community member that I see every day in my work, all in the same place at the same time. My best answer was knowledge, and the ability for people to learn where they can turn to find the information they seek in order to make a well-informed choice about vaping and e-cigarettes moving forward. With that in mind, I challenge each and every one of you here in attendance tonight to put on pause your preconceived notions, expectations, and arguments regarding what you expect to hear here. Rather, I challenge you to open up your mind to examine and think about the topic objectively while you listen to findings and experiences shared from multiple angles and perspectives on the subject. Tonight's program is by no means meant to be the end-all be-all conversation on this subject, nor is it meant to favor either side of the discussion about the merits or the detriments of vaping. Rather, it's meant to stimulate thought, provide up-to-date science and evidence-based information, and open the door for a more educated and well-informed dialogue at every level about this largely misunderstood new concept called vaping. With that in mind, it's now my honor to introduce you to the panelists who will be discussing this issue with us tonight. First off, we have Representative Kevin Schreiber. Representative Schreiber was elected to serve as state representative for the 95th Legislative District in York County in a special election on May 21st in 2013. He resides in the city of York with his wife Jen and their Cavalier Spaniel, Lucy. He earned his bachelor's degree in public relations from York College and his master's degree in public administration from Penn State University. He's an advocate for the advancement of education and health in the community. And Representative Schreiber is a member of many committees in the Pennsylvania government, some of which include education, tourism and recreational development, and local government. Please have a nice round of applause for Representative Schreiber. Next we have Dr. Katie Palisoc. Dr. Palisoc is a physician in the Hospitalist Medicine Department at York Memorial Hospital. As a hospitalist physician, Dr. Palisoc provides care to patients during their stay at the hospital. Dr. Palisoc completed her undergraduate studies at Canisius College in Buffalo, New York, and went on to receive her master's degree in biomedical sciences at Midwestern University in Illinois. She attended medical school at Touro College of Osteopathic Medicine in Harlem, New York, and completed her residency at Palisades Medical Center in North Bergen, New Jersey. Please welcome Dr. Palisoc. Next, we have Marie Drawbaugh. Marie is a certified tobacco treatment specialist and respiratory therapist for WellSpan Health. In her role as a tobacco cessation counselor, she currently provides services to the community in both York and Adams County in Pennsylvania. Marie is licensed and highly trained in respiratory therapy and possesses expertise in multiple aspects of respiratory care. She's held positions at York Hospital as Assistant Director of Pulmonary Services, Director of Respiratory Therapy, and has taught medical terminology. Marie is also a graduate of York College with a degree in Business Management. Please welcome Marie. Next, we have Janise Bankard. Janise is the Program Specialist and Tobacco Control Program Community Coordinator with the American Lung Association in Pennsylvania. She serves as Regional Primary Contractor for the Pennsylvania Department of Health, overseeing the administration and management of tobacco control program grant dollars disseminated throughout the 13-county South Central region in Pennsylvania. Janise also chairs the South Central Tobacco-Free Coalition, consisting of 53 members representing 28 different organizations. Her current program focuses on tobacco prevention, cessation, advocacy, enforcement, and integration services. She is here to provide information on the American Lung Association's stance on e-cigarettes and other vaping products, as well as share resources to help educate the community on how to address this growing area of interest. Please welcome Janise. And last, but certainly not least, the moderator for tonight's panel, Dr. Matthew Howie. Dr. Howie is the medical director of the Bureau of Health for the City of York and brings nearly 2 decades of medical experience to his role with the city. As the medical director, he oversees programs that include investigating and reducing the transmission of communicable diseases such as tuberculosis, as well as responding to outbreaks of other contagious diseases, including whooping cough and influenza. His work also focuses on addressing other public health concerns such as birth outcomes, environmental hazards, and risk factors for chronic disease. Dr. Howie also continues to serve as medical director for WellSpan at the York Hospital Community Health Center. He graduated from the University of Maryland School of Medicine in 1997, followed with a residency in family medicine at York Hospital. After working as a member of the U.S. Public Health Service for 3 years with Native American Indian tribes in northern Arizona, Dr. Howie returned to York to work at the York Hospital Community Health Center. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to turn over the microphone to tonight's moderator, Dr. Matthew Howie.
Well, thank you. That was a wonderful introduction, and I am certainly not as comfortable behind the microphone as Kyle is. Very, very well done. So just a couple of comments when we're getting started tonight, and then I will start with the question session for the individuals on our panel. First, in preparation for this evening, I did what most doctors do when we have these kind of questions posed to us, was we tried to do a little bit of research. And I was left with a couple of compelling lessons at the end of my review. First, there is a remarkably passionate dialogue occurring about e-cigarettes and vaping. And there are people on both sides of the discussion who are passionate and sincere individuals, and that's pretty impressive. The other thing that was remarkable to me was the data is pretty limited in terms of what's going on surrounding e-cigarettes and vaping. And knowing those two issues, there's a whole lot of opportunity for people to get confused and for people to not understand what the facts are. So our goal, I think everybody's goal in terms of being on the panel tonight, is to try to clear the air as much as we can about what we know, be honest about what we don't know, and hopefully try to have a better understanding at the end than we had coming into this evening. So first, new product to the market. E-cigarettes have started around 2007, depending on who you listen to. Number two, at this point, the science is very young. When you talk about individuals who are struggling with chronic diseases and the effects of chronic diseases, they take many years, sometimes decades, to present based on effects. So something that started occurring in terms of a societal movement 9 years ago, we're not going to have a lot of data, and that's understandable. The last thing, at this point, there's no age restriction to this. And as a physician, that concerns me a little bit. But again, I'm open to hearing the conversation and learn a little bit more tonight as well. So, process for how this evening is going to go, best I understand. We have a couple of prepared questions, and we have some folks who are willing to take those questions. But I really would encourage folks to take those 3x5 cards out. Put your questions down. We have somebody who's going to be kind of circulating to bring those questions to me, and we'll put those questions to the panel, and we'll try to get the best answers that we can. So with that being said, we'll kind of go to our questions. First question, and this will be like whoever jumps first gets the question panel, but more than one person can respond, I promise. First question, based on what you do, what is your perspective on vaping? And perhaps this is one that each person can kind of share their view on it. And along with that question, what is the state of it in York? And do you see it as a problem or not? We'll just work our way down. We'll start with Katie first.
I do see vaping as a question mark because we really, like you said, don't know the science behind it. It's too young. There really isn't any FDA regulation on it. And I do see it as potentially a problem. I know some individuals are using it for smoking cessation, and I see smoking cessation as 4 different options. You can use vaping, where you can taper down the amount of nicotine in your e-cigarette. You can use pharmacologics like Wellbutrin or Chantix. You can use cold turkey, or you can use nicotine patches, gums, and lozenges, which are more federally regulated, and you know exactly what's in it. I do see it as a problem. I've seen in the hospital patients actually trying to vape in their hospital room in the ICU when they're sick, and we don't know what the chemicals are potentially doing to them. There's oxygen in the room, there's fire. I do see it as a problem in that aspect.
First and foremost, thank you to everyone for coming out tonight, and thank you to the panelists, and of course to William Penn for hosting this. And I will say that introduction definitely earned some points for the most puns inserted into an introduction. That was demystifying, taking by storm. Those were all pretty good. But this started for me. It was about a year ago. It was actually, and James, I can tell you, it was the date. It was April 16th. I was asked, I've been a state rep for a couple years now, and I was asked at that time to come and meet with James Cattle, who is here tonight and has a vape shop over on Queen Street. And I'll fully admit my own ignorance. I was a novice to the industry. I don't know a whole heck of a lot, especially at that point. James had hit me up on Facebook or email or something and just asked if I could come by and meet. This was around the point in time where there was a tax being proposed on the industry, as well as the smokeless tobacco and cigar tax that has sort of been kind of perennially kicked around in the legislature. But, I have to say, spending several hours actually with James, several other folks, he had introduced me to at least I think one e-juice manufacturer and at least maybe one other proprietor, and certainly there were a couple folks in and out as customers. I learned a lot just from that moment and have since, sort of paid a little bit more attention, and I think have noticed a little bit more of it. And I can flat out say I have several friends that would tell me that they use e-cigarettes or vaping to quit smoking, and I think that should be celebrated. And one literally yesterday, I guess he saw somewhere that we were having this event, and he shot me a text just saying he's now 1 year free smoking and vaping or e-cigarettes. I know I'll use those somewhat interchangeably, but some sort of electronic device really helped him get off that. And I think that is really the example that we would like to use from a vaping perspective, that it can be a good thing and it really can be a good tool for individuals. But of course, I know we'll talk a little bit more about that on a whole varying levels. But it was that day I remember, April 16th, because literally after spending about 2 hours at James's shop, I'm walking back to the office and I get my news alert. New York Times had issued a report that very same day showing that while we have had one of the strongest declines in teenage smoking in generations, again, something that we should celebrate and be happy about, we've also seen an alarming rise in teenage nicotine use. And I don't think anyone could argue that the two are likely not correlated. And some of the dialogue that I had that day with James and have since had, and sorry I'm putting you kind of on the spot here, I think it was impressive. James immediately said, from the legislative perspective, there's a whole host of bills out there, and I think we have packets at the back, or you can pick them up on your way out, that gives you all of the bills that are currently out there that affect the industry in some form or fashion. But one sort of piece of legislation that's comprised in a whole host of bills is to prohibit the sale to minors. And I think that's a big piece of what I was hoping to accomplish tonight, is to heighten that awareness. There are parents that are not aware that their child can purchase this equipment. They can purchase it at a vape shop if they're less than, they can purchase it at some vape shops, they can purchase it online. And that New York Times article, while admittedly the data still may be young, it at least should cause us to pause and have the conversation and have that community dialogue. And to James's credit and some of the other folks that were there that day, I know they have a self-imposed policy not to sell to minors. I think that's a very good thing. But we know that it is getting in the hands of some minors, and certainly some are using it. And just even in focus groups in high school settings or middle school, we know that teenagers are starting to use this. So I think it's incumbent on us as a community, it's incumbent on healthcare professionals or those in government, obviously, to recognize that and say, for any 15-year-old, in York County, if they have an option between a cigarette or an e-cigarette, I think most would agree we don't want them to pick up either. And that's really what part of this dialogue is about. So I know we'll get into some of the other legislative matters and how this is proceeding through the General Assembly, but that's really how I kind of was tied into this. And then, as was mentioned, we're all sort of affiliated with some of the organizations that have helped sponsor tonight's event. But really, it came from face-to-face interaction with a proprietor, with some of the manufacturers and some of the customers, and trying to educate myself and learn a little bit more.
Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. We at the American Lung Association do not support vaping. E-cigarettes are tobacco products, and they should be defined as such. We are noticing trends that in the middle school and the high schools, as students that have never smoked cigarettes are now claiming to be e-cigarette users. I myself was a smoker 3 years ago, and I did use vaping as a tool to quit smoking. However, that tool did not work for me. That tool continued to inhabit my tobacco sensation or my tobacco need, and it was through attending freedom from smoking classes and using nicotine replacement therapy that helped me quit smoking. Also, another thing was that, with smoking, there is a 3-link chain of addiction, and that is mental, behavioral, and physical. And all of those things with vaping still continue because you're mentally, you're physically, And you're not helping yourself, I think, with the opportunity to quit smoking because you still have the nicotine taste. You want it. So, and again, at the American Lung Association, we don't support, the vaping products. Okay.
I have to agree that usually when a patient comes to me, we will talk about all of the FDA-approved products first. And if someone tells me, yes, they really would like to try vaping, I tell them that I don't condemn it, but I don't condone it. And that I just think they really need to do the research on their own, not just listen to their friends, but do the research so that they know and they're comfortable with what they're doing. Our goal is to really make sure the children and the young adolescents are not getting a hold of this product. It can be deadly, especially with toddlers. And we want to make sure that if this product is going to be out there, that it is safe for everybody. And we want it to be safer, but nicotine is addictive, so it truly is something we want to think about. And is it something we want to put into our system?
All right, thank you very much. Just as a little bit of a background, the e-cigarettes do use nicotine, again, and we're all pretty aware of that, but nicotine, when absorbed in that manner, goes to the brain very quickly. Stimulates certain areas of the brain that involve pleasure. It's very reinforcing. And the one comment that was made, and I thought was very telling when we talk about the safety with children, there's the immediate safety of young children, but I concern myself, I work a lot with adolescents. And when I hear about the developing brain of adolescents, early exposure to tobacco products has been shown to be very, and in my experience, has borne this out. Once addicted, very difficult to get people to stop using tobacco products when they get older. When you make that choice later in life, it doesn't seem to have the same effect, which reinforces to me that there is a developing brain issue here. And I do get concerned when I hear about the use of nicotine, which is a known reinforcer, a known stimulant for certain aspects of the brain in a developing brain, because I really do think it has the potential to shape the plastic nature of those young brains. So my 2 cents to add in on the backside of that. I'm looking for more questions. Hopefully they'll be here soon, but we'll go to the next one. Many see vaping as a step in the right direction for people who want to quit smoking. Do you see it as a help or a hindrance to people trying to quit? And again, anyone can jump in.
I do see it as a hindrance rather than a help. Research has shown that people that are trying to quit, there's no real difference between vaping versus using nicotine patches and gums and lozenges. You're still having the oral fixation, you're still having nicotine. I think that it really is a hindrance. I think going through the smoking cessation classes, and I actually do think that the patches and gums and lozenges are more effective. I don't think that using the pharmacologic agents are any more effective either, like the Chantix and Wellbutrin, because there's so many side effects of that as well. And since we really don't know the long-term effects of vaping, I don't think that it's as safe as we think. I mean, think about it like this. Would you take this drug that hasn't really been researched very much, but could potentially help you stop smoking? Would you take that versus vaping? It's pretty much the same thing. It hasn't really been researched, the long-term effects. It hasn't been FDA regulated. It's not as safe as we would assume.
At the American Lung Association, of course, like I said, we do not support vaping as an effective method to quit. We only support the 7 medications that are approved by the FDA for smoking cessation. Those are proven to be safe and effective when used as directed. E-cigarettes have not been found to be safe and effective to help smokers quit.
All right, we're going to follow up on that. I mean, is there a set way or guidance, even if it's not an FDA-approved approach, but is there a set way or guidance to using vaping as a tool to quit? And are you aware of any of the science behind that, if that has been used? Does that make sense?
What I might say, and I guess it sort of complements the last question too, is this is pure anecdote. And again, I'm not a healthcare professional, although I guess sometimes in committee I play one on TV. But I think it's important also to recognize that whatever is going to help an individual quit, if they make that choice to quit, is unique to them. Whatever can help them, I think we generally should support. It's obviously, there has to be a line from the healthcare professions that if it's at risk to themselves or to others, then obviously I think we would draw that line. And again, just from some of that anecdote, we know that there are people that would say it has helped them quit. And again, I think, generally speaking from a community perspective, we would probably want to support whatever assistance we can provide. I can, and I know I cleared this sort of with the panel, but there is a gentleman, Chris Hughes here. If Chris, I know he was going to talk a little bit about just his success story of using it as to quit. And if I could, and again, I know we had talked about this earlier. Chris, if you're willing, just to come up and I guess for 2 minutes, share your story about how you are a success story. And I do think that's important to the dialogue as, again, this is a new industry and it will continue to develop.
Thank you, Representative. Can I just sit on the edge of the stage? How's everyone doing tonight? I'm going to make myself comfortable. I'm an old man. That was a big leap to get up there. I want to thank the esteemed members of the panel for allowing me to speak tonight. I've heard some things that I disagree with up here tonight, but we'll pass on that for a second. My name is Chris Hughes. I am the president of the Pennsylvania chapter of the Smoke-Free Alternatives Trade Association. We're the trade association for small vapor products businesses. I own a shop in Williamsport area and drove down here tonight to participate in this event. My shop's called Fat Cat Vapor Shop, and I have 3 employees exactly, full-time employees, including myself. My story was that I smoked for over 30 years. I was a cigarette addict, very addicted. After my wife painted the house, I used to wake up in the night after I couldn't smoke. I was no longer allowed to smoke in the house. I would wake up and have to go out on the porch 1 to 2 times per night, overnight, or I wouldn't be able to get back to sleep. My last experience smoking was I wore 21 milligram, the highest strength nicotine patches for 2 years almost, and continued to smoke a half a pack of cigarettes a day, which I'm sure the medical profession, Dr. Howie up here is like, dude, how are you alive? So it was not a good experience. I was having shooting pains in my arm, and then a friend of mine introduced me to vapor products. I initiated with those products and continued to smoke as a dual user for about 2 years. I went from smoking 1.5 packs of cigarettes a day down to about 3 cigarettes a day while I was vaping. Over that time, I was evaluated by my doctor. Both my doctor and dentist were very happy with my health, my overall physical and oral health. And it had such a profound positive effect on my life, vaping. It was such a profound change that I decided I had to open a business to share this experience with others. And I'd never owned a business before, but I wanted to help people. And that altruism is what I have seen in the Pennsylvania vapor products industry. People overwhelmingly in other industries open a business 80% to make money and 20% to do something they like. And it's the exact opposite from what I've seen. And I'm sure there are exceptions. There are exceptions in any business. A couple of things that I'd like to point out, and I didn't bring my notes up, but I know there's a lot of talk about minors being able to access these products and they're not being illegal. I would actually like to point out that it is illegal for minors to purchase vapor products in 48 of the 50 states. Pennsylvania and Michigan are the only 2 states that allow minors to purchase. I don't like that. I feel very strongly that these are adult products and they're primarily for adult smokers. There are about 9 to 10 million people, currently adults, that are regular users using these products in the United States, and that number is from the CDC. Of those 9 to 10 million regular users, 99.6%, if you can believe this, of the regular users are former smokers. there are people that are transiting from combustible tobacco to these products. Many of them are dual users. They are still smoking, a small amount, though at a much reduced rate. And I think that's good. I think something else that I'd like everyone to be aware of is that last September, the British government released a landmark review that they did of vaping, of vapor products. That review, that assessment, found that vapor products, they felt, were at least 95% less harmful than smoking. That we have a lot of bitter opponents of vaping in this country, both researchers and many times public health organizations. Not much of that motivation is probably ideology. Some of it's people aren't experienced with vaping. They don't know anything about it. There's a tremendous amount of misinformation out there. So I would say, I think vaping is a terrific option if you are an adult and you can or won't quit smoking. Something that I heard up here repeatedly, that it's a characterization of vaping that I would like to correct, is that these products are not cessation products. They simply aren't. They are a reduced harm alternative to smoking. It's that simple. One of the side effects of people that smoke initiating with vaping is oftentimes that they completely 100% substitute smoking. And to be honest, 1,300 Americans are dying every single day from smoking-related illness. And these products have been around for 10 years. I'm going to go back a little further than Dr. Howie did on the history of these products. They were actually invented in China by a gentleman named Han Lick, that was a Chinese pharmacist, and his father had died from lung cancer from smoking. And he wanted to create something that would help smokers get nicotine, which can be addictive. I know that's a whole nother topic. We could have a whole panel on it, the addictiveness of nicotine outside of cigarette smoke. I know I just flew to California last week with my wife for vacation, a business vacation, and I really didn't have any problems on the plane too much. But Mr. Lick invented these products because he wanted to help, and I think they have an incredible potential to help. We have a lot of regulatory things. I don't think that smokers, if an adult smoker wants to switch to these products, I think there is an ever-growing mountain of evidence. I know I hear people on the panel have said that not much is known about them. I have hundreds of studies on e-cigarettes on my computer. There's actually a tremendous amount of science, and I would be happy to share any of that science with anyone on the panel, and I'll make sure to get everyone on the panel my business card before I go, including Dr. Howie, and I hope they would feel free to reach out to me and talk to me. I think if these people on this panel are against people smoking cigarettes, they should be on my side. We should be tremendous allies in this, because that's why I opened my business. I don't sell anything from the tobacco industry, nothing. And I know we are characterized a lot as being the tobacco industry, and that's simply not true. So I wanted to point out something else, and I'm going to pass this up here for these guys, and then I'm going to give you guys the mic back. NIDA, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, did a survey last year. They do it every year, called Monitoring the Future. And it's very detailed. And what it found last year, they did a lot of work on nicotine. What it found last year was that youth vaping, even though you hear in the news all the time, and we hear on the panel, is skyrocketing. Overall, nationwide, youth vaping declined a modest 5% last year. And that's great news, because, again, these are adult products. Another thing the study found was that only about 20% of minors that are using these products are using products intentionally that contain nicotine. 60% are intentionally using products that only have flavoring. Still not good. They still should not be allowed to do that at all. There should, in the minor ban that we support, Representative Rapp's bill, makes no distinction for that, and that's terrific. So I'm going to yield the microphone, because I've taken way too much of these guys' time, but I appreciate you all for letting me speak, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris, and I appreciate especially putting you on the spot. And thank you to the panelists too for indulging as well. That was something that obviously I wanted to do because again, I think it's important as we have this dialogue that all the sides are heard, and that was an important dialogue to hear too. So.
All right. Forgive me for a moment now. Now the flood of 3x5 cards is coming in, and I'll do my best to sort through these. One of them that was addressed, I think, very nicely by Chris was the use of vaping is in fact 95% safer than smoking per the New England, it says recent Health England study. I got to believe that's New England Journal of Medicine, or is it Lancet, or what is it? Sorry, I don't mean to mumble about that, but I'm trying to make sense of this. All right, I'm gonna work on, I'm gonna put one more of my standard questions out there, and then I'll be able to prioritize some of the 3x5s. How can we, I'm going to go to the advertising piece, because this is an area, as I read, I got pretty concerned. Are there restrictions on advertising vaping and vaping products, especially towards youth? What implications does this have on use? Is the advertising making a difference? And I'm going to let you guys jump into that and give me a minute to get my 3x5 straight.
And I think, again, Chris had mentioned that Pennsylvania, unfortunately, is woefully late to the game to help step in and provide some regulatory oversight in this. And this is another avenue as well with respect to advertising. I think it's important that any number of the bills out there, and again, I know there's some information in the back if you really want to grab it and read it on your way out, but is that we learn from the mistakes of the past. And I recognize the interest in not comparing to big tobacco or conflating these industries together, but you can't ignore that some of the practices of old that we saw that we should have learned better this go around are starting to leach their way in. And as I was discussing, I think with James or someone else, but I think it should alarm us when I believe it's R.J. Reynolds, correct me if anyone knows different, had recently purchased Blue. Now you do have big British American tobacco, thank you. So I was close, but I think that's where we have to just, again, be on alert and be conscious of that. And it was just, again, maybe I'm noticing it now because in advance of the panel or that it's a heightened sense of awareness, but just seeing a truck drive by the other day with a vaping ad on it, I think we need to take the steps necessary to ensure that we don't allow a future generation or a current generation of teenagers to become addicted to nicotine, and whether they become future smokers or not. Obviously, I think it's incumbent on us to try to set those regulations and at minimum ensure that everyone is playing equally and by the same rules.
All right, I'm gonna go, there are a couple of ones here that are pretty straightforward. Hopefully we can kind of walk through those. What chemicals are being inhaled with vaping? What's the components that are in the vaping solution? Can anybody speak to that?
Some of the chemicals that are being used are the different flavorings. And in some of the flavorings, there appears to be some products that can cause pneumonias. We know there was one lady, it was written up in chest, who ended up being ventilated, had a bilateral pneumonia, and was traced back to her electronic cigarette, which was 7 months earlier that she began to use it. So maybe some of the products don't show up right away. There is some formaldehyde, and usually that shows when you change how hot you burn your electronic cigarette or your vaping pen. So there are some products in there, there are some chemicals in there, and I think that's what we're concerned about is the glycerin or the glycol that's used is a grease-based, and being a respiratory therapist, and I understand that every article that I've read, it says that it is food approved, but what happens when you vaporize that and you're inhaling that? The lungs were not meant to inhale grease. And so those are my questions personally. What happens with that? And if somebody can answer that for me, I'd be happy.
Piggybacking on what Marie was saying. So I know a lot of people are probably talking about the New England Journal of Medicine article about the formaldehydes being produced at higher burning temperatures. It's because of the the propylene glycol and glycerol, like she was talking about, when those are vaporized, they produce hemiacetals, which are known to cause cancer. So that's kind of piggybacking on what you were saying.
To also state that whenever I was vaping and using electronic cigarette, one of the ways that you could get the best hit off of your vaping tool was to turn the heat up. They always told me to don't go over 0.4 or don't take it past this mark, but in order to get the smoke to where you want it. And then as I graduated into different tools, I found that it wasn't as easy to regulate exactly what the heat was on the machine anyway. So there's a lot of confusion, I think, out there as far as how these tools work and as far as how to control this heat to prevent these chemicals from harming you and the people that are around you.
The only thing I would add is with respect to the New England Journal of Medicine and some of the things that were said. I know there is some legislation in other states, and admittedly, I'm not positive if it's been passed or not, but that would regulate the voltage that is accessible by the device. There is no bill presently in the House or the Senate to do that. But again, I think looking at companion states and what some of the ones that are a little bit ahead of Pennsylvania, what they're looking at, that is just one other item. And again, I'm sure there's a discussion to be had on that.
All right, I have a couple of doctor questions and also a couple of ones that, thank you for your patience with this. Are nicotine patches and lozenges addictive? That was from the audience.
Can you hear me? That's actually a really good question. I've had people who have never smoked before try nicotine gum. Anyone out there, have you tried the nicotine gum before? It's disgusting, right?
Yes.
So I think in that aspect, no, but nicotine, any form of nicotine is addicting. So I think that's why vaping is a little bit more enticing to the younger group, because it's flavored, and the gums and lozenges are disgusting, to be honest. They do flavor them. There's tropical and mint and things like that, but yeah, no, they're disgusting.
I have had people who have smoked and quit smoking, and they used the NRT, which is the nicotine replacement therapy, using the gum. And some of my patients, I have been in the hospital, and they've asked me to go speak to patients because they were hooked on the gum. And the gum seems to be the number one product that people will continue to use even after they quit smoking, and they're using it 3, 4, 5 years later, and they're asking me to please go up and try to help them stop using the Nicorette gum. The lozenge, I have only had maybe one person who had used that for a very long period of time, and we try to wean them off of that within a 3-month period, trying to make them tobacco-free and nicotine-free in 3 months.
I would just reinforce, when it comes to products that have effects in the brain that are stimulant effects, rapidity of onset is actually a really important aspect to remember. When it comes to patches, when it comes to, in patches in particular, it's a much slower onset of the nicotine into the system to get to the brain, whereas, and we're talking half an hour to an hour, depending on how long it takes to get to steady state. And whereas with vaping, we're talking a 7 to 10 second window. So it's a much rapid onset. And this is true with narcotics. It's true with other medications and drugs that have addictive potential. And you just need to be careful about this. The speed of onset really is a big driver and reinforcer. And that's one of the areas of concern. I leave it at that. It's very similar in terms of time of onset to those who are smoking tobacco products as well. What is the efficacy of nicotine patches at 6 months? And I don't have an answer for that, but I'm hoping one of my folks down there at the end can help me out with that.
I actually noted that number 6%.
What was the number?
6%.
Okay. So 6%.
So after 6 months, about 94% of people that initiate with them are back to smoking again.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the products for smoking cessation are proven. They have a great deal of science behind them. But the numbers are not as impressive as we would like them to be, for darn sure. I mean, ultimately, we're talking about trying to get people off of use of tobacco products and off of nicotine. And, we're looking for better alternatives for sure, but you got to do things in a safe manner. And the medical history, I'll kind of speak to a little bit of the medical history. I'll just take a minute. We have a long history of rolling products out thinking they're safe, and then learning over time that they weren't nearly as safe as we thought they were, and as horrific as thalidomide was. It was great for nausea during pregnancy. Unfortunately, it did a horrible thing to babies during pregnancy, and no one intended that. There was research done, no one picked up on it until after it was out in the general public. That is one of those cautions when it comes to new products that I just would urge people to remember. Everyone is well intended in terms of wanting to quit smoking. I don't think anyone argues in this entire building that that's a dangerous thing. We're pretty confident the data is there that says when you smoke, you increase your risk of cancer, you increase your risk of heart disease, you increase your risk of stroke. There are a lot of downsides, and the list goes on from there. But in that desperation or that urgency that you feel of, gosh, we need to do something about it, we need to be careful of the steps that we take going forward, that we're not unintentionally harming people on the other side. And so much, and when I'm sensitive to the speaker earlier, the data that's out there is not large, well-done studies that I can really get behind. These are studies that are murky at best. It's not that they are right or they're wrong, they're just murky. And if I'm gonna say, hey, this is a good idea or not a good idea, I wanna make sure I have some kind of basis to stand on, because people are gonna expect that from me. Because they're gonna come back to me and say, Dr. Howie, you said this was a good idea, and here's a consequence that nobody thought of at that time, but gosh, now it really is significant. So that would be my only kind of caution when it comes to those sorts of things. Next question. What should or can be done to regulate e-cigarettes and vaping products on the internet? Which is apparently a big portal of a big source of folks, especially for folks who are underage. All it takes is a click to say, yes, I'm 18 or older.
Right, and obviously that's a challenge on a whole platitude of other items and paraphernalia that can be purchased on the internet. And look, in Pennsylvania, we've been trying to struggle to get a sales tax implemented on the internet as well. So again, that's just ensuring that there is a level playing field between retailers that have brick and mortar shops, and I'd imagine that probably some of the vaping shops that have establishments may also want to play by those same rules. So I think ultimately, that in and of itself, back to the sales tax on the internet, that in and of itself has been a challenge. I think so would regulating the internet, but it can be done, and obviously it takes a willpower, but some of that falls really more under the federal government than necessarily state government. And a lot of it, again, time will tell as this industry continues to grow. I think this industry is over $1 billion a year now. So, it's still young, but it's certainly a presence. And that's why, again, this is an important conversation and dialogue to have as policies continue to be developed. And, I think it's important that we try to look at some best case examples. But I think, again, to the question, to the point of the question is, how do we keep this out of the hands of young people? And so I think we need to really take an examination of what we can do from an enforcement perspective to ensure that it isn't getting into the hands, and it at least is not as accessible as it may be right now.
All right, I have another question here. And this came to it was actually a brief conversation Dr. Palisoc and I had earlier, because it was something I didn't know as much about, but she had actually learned a little bit about. It says, how are people using e-cigarettes? And I guess the question that goes with that, is there a potential for abuse for using them to hide other substances of abuse?
Like Dr. Howie said, we did have a conversation about this earlier. I was doing my research, and actually there's a lot of articles in our scholarly journals saying that there is, of course, an abuse potential. You can actually use it for marijuana as well. I personally don't know how that would work because I've never vaped or done marijuana, but there was actually pages and pages and pages of articles about the abuse potential for marijuana and another source to smoke marijuana with.
I'm going to hit one of the other ones that came from the crowd, so thank you guys for bringing these in. How would you address the psychoactive effects of Chantix, Wellbutrin, as well as history relating to depression and suicide.
If a patient does have a known psychiatric history, even just depression, any suicidal potential, I actually will not, in good conscience, prescribe Chantix. That's just
Yeah,
how I
these
feel.
are definitely issues that we run into with I do adult family medicine as well as pediatric family medicine. And I have that as part of the conversation with patients when we talk about alternatives. And Chantix is well known in this area. It's one that initially wasn't as well known, but sure, when you prescribe it a few times, you figured out pretty quickly that it had that side effect profile. For folks at risk for it, folks with underlying mental illness, we really do avoid it. It's not a good medication for those individuals, so it's a very reasonable thing. Wellbutrin's similar. It does not have as much of an effect in terms of destabilizing mood, but it can actually have other effects that we've known. We use that medication for depression quite a bit, and in some individuals, it can lead to a little bit of agitation or heightened, almost hypomanic, extra active activity. So we monitor for that as well. Yeah, no medicine's perfect, but those are the resources we have. I'll transition to another question, which is let's just talk about what are the resources that are now out there that we can speak to that have good evidence behind them in terms of smoking cessation. And I guess I'm more referring to other alternatives maybe we've hit, or even some other ones that we haven't hit.
With the American Lung Association, we work with the CDC, and we recommend that the individual use a combination of both counseling and medication to quit. We recommend, first of all, to enroll in a cessation program by phone, online, or in person to help develop a quit plan and support through the quit attempt. Secondly, we use one of the 7 FDA-regulated and approved cessation products, and they are the patch, gum, lozenge, nasal spray, inhaler, Zyban, and Chantix. And again, those last two, those are prescribed through a physician, and they would make that choice if you were, able to use that drug or not.
I might add is that again, at the back, I know where we have a table of information. If anyone really wants to take home a page turner, there's the Pennsylvania Department of Health Tobacco Settlement Fund Annual Report. It is 68 pages, so it is a short read. It actually is an interesting read, while it can also put you to sleep. But if you want to see how that tobacco settlement fund money is spent, the Department of Health is required by law to report back to the public every year. And it actually is interesting, and it's helpful, and it talks to a lot of the resources that folks at this table actually work with and implement. So I would encourage members of the public, if they are interested in seeing how that tobacco settlement money is spent in Pennsylvania, grab that. It's also available online on the Department of Health's website.
All right, I'm just trying to collect my thoughts on a couple of these that just came up. I appreciate it. We're heading to the legal aspect away from the medicine a little bit. Is there any state law or mandates that you're aware of, Pennsylvania or otherwise, that schools provide prevention education that to deter students from vaping?
Without having that question in advance, without really the ability to take a look at it, I don't think so. And if there's a health professional or an educational professional in the audience, by all means chime in. But with respect to vaping, I would say probably almost unequivocally not. With respect to tobacco in general, I mean, obviously we have schools that are smoke-free campuses. We have schools that probably have disciplinary responses. Part of this, I mentioned at the onset, really the impetus for this event started, a year ago. But we also had a report. One of the principals from a school district in York County had told me that they were more concerned that they have students vaping in the school buildings because it's much more easily to conceal, and for a lot of reasons that people choose to vape. It's generally odorless, and obviously it can be done, discreetly, and that was of concern to them. And So I did have to joke, and for the teachers in the room, please forgive me, but I said I can remember when I was in high school, and obviously, colleagues, I never did it, but someone that might sneak into the locker room or the bathroom to smoke, and obviously, if they got caught, they got in trouble. But there was always a bit of an odor coming from the faculty lounge. Just throwing that out there. But obviously, times have changed, and I don't think that's allowed anymore today. But so, with respect to the question, I don't think so. I can't say that with 100% certainty. But yes. Okay.
And also, California State Department of Public Health has an anti-vaping program. Those are not specifically directed towards youth, but they are overall anti-vaping programs, which makes me not really a fan of them.
I appreciate your honesty.
I know of.
That's actually helpful too. And for full disclosure, the Department of Health wanted to send someone down. Unfortunately, they weren't able to. They helped give some of the information. And I think, the hope is to do this again and to continue this dialogue. And again, if we need to have someone from the industry present as well to tell that side to make sure all sides are being told. But I think, and most would agree, that ultimately we don't want young people that otherwise wouldn't be smoking to pick up a cigarette or an e-cigarette. And, at a minimum, we know schools probably discourage it and are smoke-free. And York, Pennsylvania, the Eat, Play, Breathe and the Tobacco-Free York County Coalition has done a good job of getting a lot of campuses, whether it's business, education, industrial, to have a instituted smoke-free campus. So those are some of those things that have happened.
Trying to help the schools not only have a tobacco-free campus, but also the vaping, and include any tobacco product or any nicotine product. So whether it's a school or a business, we're trying to encompass all of it together. But I think right now there really isn't much as far as on the schools with vaping. I think I agree with Representative Schreiber that it is much easier to conceal. And I do hear scuttlebutt about the kids still doing it in the bathrooms and in their lockers. And so it is still a problem on the school properties.
Will that fall under the faculty as well? Does that mean there's no nicotine on the property? Is the faculty, are they not allowed to also use the patches?
They could use those if they're, because they are approved by the FDA. They can use the patches or the lozenge, as far as I know. It's the same with any of the schools. They can do that, or businesses. But as far as the active use of vaping or cigarettes or chew, all of those products are off limits.
Yeah, in that form, it's considered a prescription, so it falls under the Food and Drug Administration as a drug, and that's where it would be covered under that particular situation. This is an interesting question, just based on my personal experience in my office. Is there any research on vaping in individuals who have mental illness? It's an interesting question because mental illness and tobacco use, man, what a great correlation between those two. But are you guys aware of anything regarding vaping and mental illness?
I didn't see any specific articles directed at that. I only saw an article about linking high schoolers with new onset asthma. That's the only new medical correlation I saw.
I mean, the connection between tobacco use and mental illness, depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder is very compelling if you've ever looked at that data. And those individuals are very difficult to get to quit smoking. I've just had very limited success. I refer, I talk, I cajole, I try to make deals, I promise chocolate bars, whatever it takes. And it's a very difficult group to tap into. It serves a real purpose for that, and I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's very difficult to get those individuals to quit. So vaping would be intriguing for me as a prescription for an individual like that, only because my odds otherwise are very poor in terms of addressing that need. All right, I do have some other ones here. They're a little difficult to go through. I'm gonna actually start to wrap it up a little bit here, but I have kind of a question. I can't see terribly well from here. First, how many individuals in this room right now have vaped or are presently consider themselves vapors? And can you guys, anybody who's not blinded by light, give me a ballpark percentage on that?
50, 60, 70%.
Okay, that was my guess. I'm gonna have you put your hands down for a second. I'm gonna do the other kind of teach back thing. How many people here, we were talking earlier about learn something new or different tonight. Can I have a raise of hands? Anybody learn something new or different tonight? Or they feel like, hey, this was kind of just something reinforcing that I already knew? And then anybody who wants to yell the percentages? 40%, all right, hey, that was a great thing. I'll raise my hand to that. I feel like I learned something as well. I'm gonna open it up to any of the panelists here for closing comments. We can just go down one at a time and we'll talk a little bit about closing comments.
I would like to address the secondhand smoke. With the Clean Air Act, it's important to talk about that in its entirety because the people around us that are inhaling the vapors deserve to be protected as well. 2 studies by the FDA found that formaldehyde, benzene, and tobacco carcinogen were coming from secondhand smoke emissions from the e-cigarettes. The secondhand aerosol can potentially be toxic to developing fetuses and have lasting consequences for adolescent brain development. For someone that is a non-smoker, the nicotine is an acute irritant, potentially causing headache, nausea, and discomfort. So again, I just wanted to bring those out and present those this evening.
There we go. We're starting to get the hang of that microphone now that it's time to wrap up. Just thank you again to the panelists. Thank you to our moderator. Thank you to the host organizations. And thank you to everyone coming out tonight. I do think this is an important dialogue to have. I think it's certainly overdue and as even discussed, obviously, unfortunately, Pennsylvania seems to be well behind the curve on this one too. And I think, walking out of here, most would generally agree, as I had started this dialogue, that there is a package of legislation that's out there in the State General Assembly right now. Most is dealing with prohibition of sale to minors, the more rigorous controls on advertising, especially advertising directed at minors, the amending the Clean Indoor Air Act. That's true. And I think, like I said at the onset, any of these issues is certainly open to debate and discussion, and that's a discussion that we should have in the General Assembly. But I think most would agree that doing what we can as a society to prevent a young person from picking up the nicotine, becoming addicted, is certainly important, and that includes the prohibition on the sale. So I do appreciate everyone's input and taking the time. And again, I fully would hope and anticipate having this discussion again. And I think it's important that everyone that walks out of here also feels that there is a call to action. It sounds like there's general agreement, at least on one bill that's out there to prohibit sale to minors. I think it's important that everyone let their representatives, and if I'm your representative, you don't have to let me know, I'm there. But I think it's important that you have that conversation because we do need to push that across the finish line. That's part of this discussion and dialogue. And I think it's important, as I told James a year ago, that the industry be at the table. I think it's an important dialogue and it's an important push and pull in the pendulum to ensure that it's in the middle. But ultimately, I think that can help too. And that can help push some of these bills across the finish line because obviously the less opposition you have, the more ability you have to get something done. So I thank everyone again. And again, obviously, as was said at the onset, I think that was a great intro to say, hopefully people came open-minded and hopefully they learned something new. And again, hopefully as we walk out of here, we can all take up the cause to try to get some of these bills across the finish line in Pennsylvania. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.